Hey everyone, it's Ryder from Skip. Big news today. One of the leaders of the SBA is testifying before the Senate today to talk about the SBA programs, in particular the EIDL program. I have an advanced copy of that testimony I want to quickly go through. There's some really important things he's going to share today in this testimony at 10 a.m. Eastern time. So I'm going to give a quick preview here before Patrick Kelly's testimony, what he's going to say, what I think about it, and what I expect will come up. You know, this letter was written in the middle of July by the Senate Small Business Committee asking for the SBA to process all of the EIDL loan requests that were still pending and submitted before the May due date. So I expect questions about this in today's testimony, and this will have an effect on everyone who's involved or thinking about or waiting for EIDL loans. So thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe, turn on the alerts, and I'd love to hear what you think about this in the comments. Drop in your comments below. I'll pull some of these out in the next video because after this Senate testimony today and the questions that come out, I'll do an updated video. By the way, be sure you're subscribed because we're doing a YouTube live later today, an open one and a private one. If you want to join us for the private one, click the link in the description. And as always, if you want help with funding, look at the links in the description. We'd love to help you out. They're all below, or helloskip.com/join. And remember to use the code RYDERINVITE. Okay, so here's the advanced copy of the testimony that I received late last night. Patrick Kelly, Associate Administrator, Office of Capital Access, US SBA. He's presenting this today before the Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship in the US Senate. The hearing is about oversight of SBA's COVID EIDL disaster loan program. So that's the focus today, to talk about this. It's a 6-page document. There's a lot of interesting things in here, including how much fraud was actually in the program. I did some math based on some of the numbers here. So I first want to talk about what's led up to this hearing. So Cardin and Van Hollen, back in May, who are both on this committee, urged the SBA to process pending EIDL applications using available funds. That was May 6th. That's when the SBA said, we are not accepting any more applications. So many of you remember that. I covered it. Then in July 15th, 2 weeks ago, another letter from Cardin, Cornyn, Van Hollen, and Wicker led a bipartisan letter urging the SBA to process all eligible COVID EIDL applications. So momentum's happening here. The takeaway was those four, along with 44 other senators, sent a letter to Administrator Guzman to process COVID EIDL applications that were received prior to the May 6, 2022 deadline. I'm not going to reread all of this, but here is that letter. One of the takeaways, however, our offices have heard from many businesses that receive conflicting or confusing instructions as they applied for the program. Some business owners were asked to submit the same form multiple times and received assurances from an SBA rep that they were compliant, only to be told later, after waiting weeks or months, that they still failed to meet program guidelines. SBA's communication with borrowers has not met our expectations and has undermined public faith in the agency. So the other piece, we find it particularly troubling that your agency continues to tell our offices that loans cannot be completed due to the exhaustion of funds, when $800 million in loan subsidy remains enough to support more than $7 billion in lending. And to close this letter that was written again 2 weeks ago, here it is. We respect that the SBA will not approve every applicant, but we expect that when someone is deemed ineligible, SBA will provide specific, unambiguous explanation for its decision. Any short of that is a disservice for the thousands of business owners who have been led to believe they have done everything right, only to be told that their application cannot be processed because the program has closed. So that's the letter. This is undoubtedly going to be the main line of questioning in today's Senate Small Business Committee. So while we don't know what Patrick Kelly is going to explicitly say about that, I asked the SBA, hey, is it technically even possible to start processing these again? What does that look like? Basically, what's technically possible there? What are they allowed to do? We will know more by the end of the day, no doubt about it. But here is the prepared remarks. I'll go through quickly. So first of all, Patrick Kelly, just want to say he's in charge of the Office of Capital Access administration of the 7A program, Community Advantage Pilot Program, the 504 Loan Program, the Surety Bond Program, and the Microloan Program. A lot of great programs, by the way, that many of you are also applying for or have been approved for. We've seen many people get approved for 7A and Microloan over the past 2-3 months. And like any good prepared statement, he sets the framework why we are in an unprecedented time. I'll just read you the numbers because they are impressive. In 2021, the U.S. economy added 6.4 million jobs. In no small part, that's because 2021 was a record year for new business starts. According to the census, 5.4 million Americans filed an application for a new business in 2021, more than 20% higher than any previous year on record, and more than 2/3 higher than the annual average of 3.2 million in the preceding 5 years. Any entrepreneur knows new startup businesses need capital. He'll talk about the 7A program. Main Street businesses emerging from the pandemic can manage cost pressures with low-cost working capital loans under the 7A program. And finally, Patrick ends this intro part talking about the scope of SBA's lending. SBA supported $44.8 billion in new lending in fiscal year 2021, and they've asked for more in the current fiscal year 2023 budget request. The SBA is requesting a 13% increase in lending authority across our capital programs to support ongoing demand for these programs. So briefly on the PPP, since many of you got PPP loans, the size of that program, first in 2020, there were 5.2 million loans approved for $522 billion. In 2021, an additional 284 in lending authority. So that's a total of nearly $800 billion in relief from 5,000 lenders. So shout out to all of those lenders and to all of you who received PPP. You know, we don't talk about PPP as much, but that's basically $800 billion in grants because most people have gotten those forgiven. They use them properly. $800 billion in grants. So I don't want to forget about that. There's a section on fraud, waste, and abuse in the PPP and the PPP forgiveness. And we're getting to EIDL here, but first on the RRF. And again, and this may come up in questioning today because we know tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of restaurants were left out of the RRF. It was oversubscribed. The funds were depleted very quickly, but one takeaway here, nearly 2/3 of RRF funds, $18 billion, went to businesses owned by women, veterans, and economically and socially disadvantaged individuals. But actually, here's the interesting point. So of the applications, 278,000 RRF applications represented $72 billion in requested funds. They only had $28 billion for the program. So nearly $50 billion short of the total demand for the program. So that's why there's been also talk about doing RRF round 2. At the moment, there's no major traction on that effort. So the COVID EIDL, 3.9 million loans totaling over $390 billion. Again, these are loans for almost $400 billion. Compare that to PPP, $800 billion in grants. So just want to always give the scale of some of these programs. It's easy to fixate on one thing versus another. Here's the first time I've seen this stat. Nearly 686,000 EIDL loans received an increase. Okay, so I'm going to jot that down because I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Despite the progress on the program, there were two recurring concerns: fraud and processing delays for applicants. For fraud, in red here, a series of events contributed to this challenge. It goes into basically this fundamental problem. In 2020, the CARES Act prohibited the agency from collecting tax documents to verify business identity and revenue, which is one of the strongest safeguards against fraud. So that was prohibited from the CARES Act. So very interesting here. 3.6 million COVID EIDL loans were approved without any tax document verification. That represented 92% of the total portfolio of 3.9 million. So in 2021, there was a reversal of that prohibition under the Economic Aid Act because of the fraud in 2020. So then they could do checks with the IRS. That's why things took longer. But according to the SBA and Patrick Kelly, we do not believe there is a trade-off between speed and fraud controls. But here's some interesting information. The processing delays that continue to be experienced by applicants are mostly by applicants who are filing for reconsideration. Others did not file their 2019 taxes and successfully obtained a loan in 2020 when that control was not in place, or have not submitted required documentation for verification. Now that the IRS verification control is in place, the applicant who was approved in 2020 with no IRS verification is experiencing challenges obtaining a loan increase. So this right here in red is the most important thing in this whole document, in my opinion. With an average loan increase approval rate of 50%, this means of the 3.6 million loans administered in 2020 with no tax verification, half of those that came back for loan increases have been declined for not meeting eligibility and fraud controls. So remember that 686,000 number? That's how many people were approved for increases. So that means if you double that number, right, that's only 50% of the total folks who came back. If you double that number, you'd get 1.4 million folks who came back for more in 2021. And 700,000 of those folks were declined for not meeting eligibility and fraud controls. 700,000 borrowers declined for reconsiderations. Now, probably a lot of those may not be valid. Maybe they are eligible. Maybe they just didn't have the right documents and they weren't told what documents they needed. That's one of the reasons why this inquiry is happening. But I just wanted to point out that number because that's the equivalent of 20% of all EIDL borrowers that were approved. 20% came back and were denied for not meeting eligibility and fraud controls. 1 out of 5 of you. That's a large number. So the question is, of that 20% of those 700,000 folks who've come back, how many of those are valid? How many of those were denied because of internal process errors, communication errors? And that's the line of questioning that's going to come up today. And I hope we have some more answers in the Q&A. I'm not sure Patrick Kelly is going to stray too much from the vetted numbers in this advanced copy of his testimony, but let's see, and I'll cover his testimony later today, if not tomorrow. We're also doing a YouTube live later today as well. But to end here, I just want to give a shout out to his shout out. Here it is. I am incredibly grateful for the tremendous amount of work the SBA staff has put in over the past year to get over $700 billion of relief to small business owners and nonprofits, right? So $700 billion in relief. Despite unthinkable circumstances and devastating loss, this team quickly executed on the largest SBA program in history, protecting millions of Americans and their livelihoods. So huge shout out to the effort there, despite the problems. So overall, I think it's been a huge success, but we will find out more answers today in this testimony on if they'll continue processing EIDL applications that haven't been decisioned. And then we'll switch to talk about EIDL loan servicing, because 4 million of you out there are going to need to start paying back some of these loans. Repayments are starting for many of you in November and December this year. So thanks for tuning in. As always, if you want one-on-one help to talk to us, use the link in the description or go to helloskip.com/join. Use the referral code Ryder invite. You'll get priority access. If you book VIP today, I'm going to join the call. So keep that in mind. There's limited spots there. If you book VIP today, I will join your introductory call. Would love to meet you and hear about your business or idea. Most importantly, stay well, stay healthy, and I'll see you later.